GoLocal Live. I'm Josh Fenton, CEO and co-founder. A couple quick pieces of news on GoLocal this morning. BLM, Black Lives Matter, is having a protest against the Pawtucket Red Sox, soon to be the Woo Sox up in Worcester, claiming a lack of attention to issues within the black community. They say, the Rhode Island chapter say, they're working with folks in Central Mass as well to try and get a change in policy. GoLocal a couple of years ago had written a story about how in the top echelons of the Pawtucket Red Sox, the top 30 employees, there were no folks of color. Also, a disturbing story coming out of Salve Regina University about a real star in the theater community here in Rhode Island and a professor at Salve sexually harassing one of his students. That story is up, broken by GoLocal this morning. Take a look at that. But let's go to the University of Virginia's Jennifer Lawless, chair of the political science department. Professor, thanks so much for joining us.
Of course.
So lots of polls are out post the Republican convention. They all came flooding out this morning. And most of them show, I guess all of them show, Joe Biden with a lead. But it's not quite time to celebrate and rent out the Javits Center yet, is it, for Democrats?
I think the Democrats have learned that it's never time to rent out the Javits Center. The polls suggest that Biden was able to withhold a dip in the polls and withstand his lead following both the Democratic and the Republican conventions. So basically, we're very much now where we were prior to the conventions, except that a small percentage of voters have made decisions. The unknowns are a little bit less popular than they were pre-convention, but generally the dynamics of the race remain largely the same.
The race seems a little more defined, though, isn't it? You know, Donald Trump, whether you thought the convention was a success for the Republicans or not, seems to have defined his message as being one of law and order, and that one in which he is the best suited to moving the country through this period of rioting and violence in urban centers.
That's certainly the message that the campaign has been putting out over the course of the last 10 days. The problem for Trump is that the recent polls indicate that Joe Biden actually has a lead when it comes to law and order. And so I wouldn't be surprised if over the course of the next couple of weeks, certainly leading up to the next debate, the Trump campaign begins to tweak that message or expand it or redefine it in some way. Because if that's the message, it seems at this point that it's not going to be enough for Trump to cross the finish line.
If you were to judge it, we now have about a week's perspective. Who do you think had the better convention?
I think the Democrats had a better convention if the goal was to increase enthusiasm and woo independent voters. I think the Republicans probably had a better convention if the metrics we're using are basically performing in a way that people are accustomed to when they see a convention. And the Republicans also did a better job, I think, delivering red meat to their base. So you can see the competing strategies. The Republicans shored up a lot of Republican support. The Democrats tried their hardest to make sure that they convinced the independents to come to their side.
Let's leave convention heaven and travel to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Joe Kennedy, one of the brightest stars in the Democratic Party. I believe he was the Democratic respondent to the State of the Union a couple of years ago, took on Ed Markey and got spanked. No two ways to define it. What happened for poor Joe Kennedy in Massachusetts?
Well, I think there was no reason for Markey to lose the election, and there was no argument that Kennedy made to suggest that he should be in the Senate right now. So voters have long believed that if it's not broken, there's no need to fix it. And although it's possible to knock out an incumbent, and we've seen it happen occasionally, there's nothing to suggest that Markey was vulnerable. And it was up to Kennedy to define those vulnerabilities, and he wasn't able to. The other thing I would note is that this became a race that really energized progressives. You had AOC, you had other progressives getting behind Markey and encouraging young people and progressive voters to turn out to vote, and it worked.
Isn't it the ultimate irony? Ed Markey, who's been in Congress for about 6,000 or 7,000 years, had AOC endorsing him, and Joe Kennedy, the young 30-year-old upstart, had Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi endorsing him.
Well, I think that this race highlighted that when we're talking about new ideas, those new ideas aren't necessarily linked to young people. You might recall that AOC was also a big Bernie Sanders supporter when there were many young candidates running for the Democratic nomination. So what we're beginning to see across the board, I think, is a sorting out of what we might consider the progressive wing of the party and the more moderate wing. I'm reluctant to use that term, though, because even the moderate wing today is quite progressive. But it's on that division and not age alone that you're seeing people make choices.
Ed Markey in his oversight of telco issues would never have been called a progressive or even a moderate. He was a corporate guy who collected millions of dollars from corporate interests back in the day when he served in the House.
Yeah, and voters don't care, right?
Yeah.
Voters basically care about your voting record now and what you're going to support. And he was a big proponent of the Green New Deal, and that's enough to propel a candidacy forward. The other thing to keep in mind is that any seat, especially in a primary, is an incumbent seat to lose. And when voters looked back over the last 6 years, there was nothing that they felt really needed to be changed or that they blamed Markey for.
Let's talk about the state of the Kennedy clan. Listen, royalty in the United States, we're down to one Kennedy. She's not really even a real Kennedy, right? She just married a Kennedy. She's running for a House seat down in New Jersey in a complex race in which a former Democrat supported the president on impeachment, one of the few Democrats to vote against impeachment in the House. He switched over to the Republican Party. Patrick Kennedy's wife, Amy, is challenging him. It's a complex race with a lot of twists and turns. What happens down there?
I think that's a difficult race. It's strange dynamics because you have an incumbent who's no longer really the party's incumbent. I think if the Democrats have a good year and turnout is high, as we expect, that she'll win that race. In terms of the Kennedy clan overall, although this was a loss, I wouldn't count them out. There's an entire generation of Kennedys who are now on the brink and on the precipice of deciding whether they want to run for office as their way of fulfilling public service obligations. So my bet is even if we don't have any for the next year or two, we have not seen the end of this family.
Have we seen the end of Joe Kennedy? Does he, if Biden were to win, is he the ambassador to something or another? Does he become something significant in the Biden administration?
I don't know. I think a lot of it will come down to what he wants to do. He's young, and he could decide that right now he wants to take a step back from politics and re-enter later in life. We've seen that happen as well. But I certainly wouldn't count him out. If he wants to stay involved, I find it hard to believe that either the administration or other political entities wouldn't be happy to have him.
Speaking of Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, does it have a gate term to it yet? Nancy Pelosi got her hair done. She shouldn't have gotten her hair done. Not only did she not get her hair done the right way in California, but it appears that she has done this illegally, inappropriately, in violation of state regulations numerous times. Is this a big issue, or is this just, something for social media for a day or two?
Well, I think that it's absolutely appalling that Donald Trump and the Trump administration, who have gone out of their way to make sure that they do not wear masks anywhere they go, that they create large gatherings and jeopardize the health of thousands and thousands of people, have decided that this is the line of attack that they want to pursue. She made a mistake. She claims, and I don't have any reason to dispute this claim, that she didn't realize what was going on and that she was misled regarding these particular circumstances going into the salon.
She got tricked.
And frankly, she apologized, and it's unclear that she jeopardized the health of other people. When you look at this administration calling her out for that, it just demonstrates a level of hypocrisy that I thought was even beyond Donald Trump.
I think he gets his hair done. So,
you think?
But her claim that she got tricked seems a little silly. Might as well just say, yes, I did it. I'm sorry. I apologize. But claiming to be tricked seems a little far-fetched. But if the Speaker, by the way, if the Speaker of the House can be tricked on where and when to get her hair done, That's not a good thing. That's not a good sign for the country either.
Although it demonstrates, I think, that it's really not that relevant, right? If the Speaker of the House can be tricked about that, but not about issues of national security, it highlights that the woman really just wanted a haircut, right? She was not going to scrutinize. She trusted that this was a salon that was following the appropriate protocols and that they weren't, according to her, duping her into going in. Regardless, given the coronavirus pandemic, given the unemployment rate, given the overall problems in this country right now, the fact that this is even a story makes me so angry.
Okay, is it a gender issue? Would we be having this discussion if it was Newt Gingrich getting his hair cut? Or is it because it's a woman?
I think that in 20 years ago it would have been gendered, but since then we've seen men, and the president is one of them, who clearly care a lot about their appearance and their hair. And so if Donald Trump wasn't president, if John Edwards hadn't been a pretty boy, maybe we would say this was gendered. But I think that any male candidate that would have done the same thing at this point probably would have garnered the same kind of criticism.
Let's jump to what's the future? Where are we right now? We've got moderators identified for the debates. Is this race now down to the debates?
Well, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but debates don't really matter that much either. The debates are useful for sound bites, just like the conventions are useful for some good footage for campaigns. But at the end of the day, rarely do the debates change hearts and minds. And so both candidates have to demonstrate that they have a modicum of mental acuity, and that's pretty much it. So I don't see the debates mattering that much. They do provide an opportunity for both candidates to engage in a major gaffe or do something that could ultimately be a problem for the campaign. But assuming that both maintain a baseline level of an acceptable appearance, there's not much to see there.
Is there any way for, based on the polling today, based on election in 60 days, is there any way for Donald Trump to close these gaps?
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, we're at a point right now where there are still undecided voters. And in the battleground states, although Joe Biden has a lead, sometimes that lead is within the margin of error. So I don't think that the Democrats should assume that anything is signed, sealed, and delivered. And I don't think that the Republicans should count out Donald Trump. And from all accounts, they're not. The other thing that's important to keep in mind here is that there's going to be a high degree of uncertainty on Election Day and in the days following the election because of the rules that states have for opening and counting absentee ballots. And so it's likely that we won't wind up with a winner on election night. And given that Republicans are probably going to be more likely than Democrats to turn out on Election Day, Trump could wind up with some momentum as we wind up counting all of those votes.
Jennifer Lawless, thank you so much. One important point to note, this week was Viola's birthday. How old is she?
She's 5.
She is 5. This is your English bulldog, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Happy birthday to Viola. Congratulations on the hot dog treat. For everyone else, stay tuned. 12 noon, Dr. Michael Fine will be Skyping in, and at 4 o'clock, we'll have Stephen Pryor, head of Commerce Corporation, to talk about what's going on in the economic development area and how to try and recover the Rhode Island economy. Thanks, everyone. Please stay safe and wear your mask.